Have you ever noticed how society trembles when someone refuses to ask for permission to think? When a person stands up and says, "I learned on my own," without diplomas, without approval, without the system, the world suddenly becomes uncomfortable. It's not because of arrogance. It's because that kind of freedom threatens control. The system has built temples around paper thrones, schools, institutions, degrees, that make you believe your mind is worthless until someone else validates it. They whisper, without credentials, you are invisible. But here's the truth they never tell you. Your curiosity alone is powerful enough to split the walls of those temples. The autodidact, the self-taught individual, is the silent rebel of modern civilization. He doesn't kneel before authority. He doesn't wait for instructions. He learns in basements, in night shifts, in cheap apartments lit only by the glow of a laptop screen. He is the ghost that walks through the corridors of academia, reminding everyone that knowledge doesn't belong to the privileged, it belongs to the curious. History has tried to erase this figure. Yet every revolution, every radical breakthrough, began with an autodidact who refused to wait for permission. Leonardo da Vinci dissecting bodies in secret, Nikola Tesla learning languages and science in poverty, modern coders teaching themselves online and building empires from bedrooms. They all share the same heresy, learning without approval. But why does this scare the system so much? Because an autodidact is unpredictable. You can't standardize his path or measure his value through exams. While others wait for grades, he turns ideas into inventions. While others collect diplomas, he collects insights. That's what makes him dangerous. The truth is simple. The world needs obedience to maintain its hierarchy. If everyone realized they could learn, build, and think freely, the illusion of control would collapse overnight. The autodidact exposes that illusion. In this video, you're going to see why self-taught minds are feared, how the system hides them, and what happens when you stop begging for validation and start trusting your own curiosity. Because the moment you stop waiting for permission to learn, you stop being a student and start becoming a creator. The system is not built to educate you. It's built to manage you. That's why from childhood, you're trained to memorize, not to question, to raise your hand for permission, not to explore on your own. The classroom becomes the rehearsal for the office. The exam becomes the prototype for obedience. And yet, the autodidact, the one who learns outside this framework, escapes that invisible design. He studies not for grades, but for understanding. Not to please, but to uncover. His learning is driven by obsession, not instruction. He doesn't fear confusion. He hunts it, because he knows that curiosity, not clarity, is where true intelligence begins. When you look at the roots of innovation, you see a pattern the institutions try to hide. The Wright brothers didn't have degrees in aerodynamics. Steve Jobs dropped out of college but dropped into calligraphy, a detail that shaped the entire design philosophy of modern computing. Maya Angelou never earned a formal degree, yet her words built emotional cathedrals. None of them waited for a gatekeeper to say you're ready. But the system needs gatekeepers. It needs the myth that without licenses and diplomas, you are lost. Why? Because control is easier when people believe they need permission to think. A dependent mind is predictable. It obeys, it submits, it fears disapproval. An independent mind is chaos, and power cannot tolerate chaos. So the architecture of control isn't made of walls or prisons. It's made of beliefs. You're told that education is a ladder, but they never mention it only reaches as high as they want you to climb. You're told success comes from credentials, but not that credentials often come from conformity. And you're told to admire titles, even when the people holding them have stopped learning years ago. Meanwhile, the autodidact quietly dismantles that structure. He learns from free resources, from mistakes, from failures that schools would mark as wrong. He builds his own syllabus out of life itself. Every error becomes an experiment. Every unanswered question becomes a door. While others wait for validation, he produces proof. That's why institutions react with discomfort. A self-taught creator doesn't fit into their grading system. He's a statistical error, a reminder that their monopoly on knowledge is an illusion. So they fight back not with censorship, but with ridicule. They brand him as a hobbyist, a charlatan, a dreamer. Because mockery is the cheapest weapon of the insecure. Yet every great change begins with someone who ignored that mockery. Every paradigm shift begins with a mind that refused to be domesticated. What they don't tell you is this: you are surrounded by knowledge that no one can own. The internet has broken the monopoly of academia. The greatest professors in the world upload their lectures for free. Scientific journals are open. Libraries are digitized. The walls have already fallen, but most people still act as if they're locked inside. Because freedom isn't granted. It's recognized. The autodidact doesn't wait for a gate to open. He realizes there never was one. Stay with me, because the next part will reveal how the system defends itself when people begin to think without permission, and how ridicule and isolation become the new forms of control. When a person starts thinking independently, society responds like an immune system under threat. It mobilizes mockery, skepticism, and fear to attack what it doesn't understand. The autodidact becomes a disturbance in the collective rhythm, a reminder that conformity is voluntary. And nothing terrifies the obedient more than realizing their chains were always unlocked. Look closely at how this control works. It's not violent. It's psychological. The system doesn't need to imprison your body when it can train your mind to stay inside invisible walls. That's why ridicule is so effective. You don't have a degree. You're not qualified. Who gave you the right to speak? Each phrase is a small electric shock, keeping you inside the mental cage of permission. It's a subtle game of social engineering. Schools, media, and workplaces all reward those who repeat what they're told, and quietly exile those who deviate. You're conditioned to equate acceptance with truth, to measure your worth by applause, and to fear isolation more than ignorance. That fear is the system's strongest weapon. The autodidact, however, turns that isolation into his laboratory. He learns in silence while others chase validation. He uses solitude to refine his thinking away from noise and judgment. In the quiet, he discovers that every subject, physics, art, code, philosophy, is just a language waiting to be decoded. His learning speed multiplies because he's driven not by fear of failure, but by fascination with discovery. History's most dangerous minds all shared this trait. Spinoza polished lenses in exile while writing ideas that shattered dogma. Michael Faraday, a bookbinder's apprentice, redefined electromagnetism without formal schooling. In modern times, creators like Elon Musk taught themselves rocket science and engineering long before building companies that reshaped industries. None of them asked for permission, and this independence comes at a price. The self-taught are often misunderstood, labeled as arrogant, unstable, or rebellious. But this loneliness is not punishment. It's proof of authenticity. Because when your mind no longer depends on collective approval, you walk a path only you can see. That solitude hardens the intellect and forges originality. Meanwhile, the obedient majority defends the very system that limits them. They mock what they secretly envy. They guard their own cages, calling them security. They've traded freedom for predictability. That's why when someone rises outside their system, they must destroy or domesticate him. Otherwise, the illusion of necessity collapses. The most Machiavellian part is that the system no longer needs to censor openly. It distracts you instead. Infinite scrolling replaces contemplation. Notifications simulate reward. Instant likes replace deep work. These are the new chains, dopamine loops disguised as connection. While you scroll, you don't learn. While you perform for validation, you forget to think. And that's exactly what keeps the structure stable. The machine doesn't fear your rebellion. It fears your attention. Because once you direct it inward, once you start questioning, everything begins to crack. You start noticing that information is free, that wisdom has always been decentralized, that the door was open the whole time. The autodidact is not the enemy of education. He's its resurrection. He proves that curiosity is the purest form of intelligence, that learning can happen anywhere, on a park bench, in a factory, on a midnight screen. What schools once did for a few, technology now allows for all. That's why the self-taught mind is the system's nightmare. It multiplies. One independent thinker sparks another, and soon the illusion of dependency begins to dissolve. In the next part, you'll see how to transform that awareness into action, how to reclaim your curiosity, build your own method of mastery, and become what institutions fear most, a self-sustaining learner, free from external control. Now that you've seen how control operates, the final step is understanding how to break it, not through rebellion, but through awareness. The first weapon of freedom is attention. Wherever you place it, energy follows. So stop giving it to the noise, the endless scroll, the approval loops. Turn it inward, where curiosity waits, untouched by algorithms. To become an autodidact is not to reject education. It's to reclaim it. It's realizing that learning belongs to you, not to universities, not to gatekeepers, not to any system that measures your worth in grades or certificates. Every idea that changed the world began as a forbidden question whispered by someone who dared to think outside the syllabus. The path of self-education begins with curiosity, discipline, and humility. You don't need to know everything. You only need to start with what ignites you. Curiosity fuels persistence. Persistence creates depth. And depth, real, earned understanding, is what separates the thinker from the repeater. But be warned, independence invites solitude. You'll be misunderstood, sometimes ridiculed. That's natural. Freedom isolates before it connects. Yet, in that silence, you'll find something the system can't give: clarity. You'll begin to see patterns others miss, connections others ignore, and possibilities others fear. That's when learning becomes transformation. In a world addicted to recognition, self-learning is an act of rebellion, but it's also an act of peace. You no longer chase approval, you chase understanding. You stop performing knowledge and begin to live it. You turn theory into practice, information into creation. And every time you do, the illusion of control weakens a little more. Because when people learn on their own, they stop being manageable. They stop being predictable. They start asking dangerous questions, the kind that awaken others. And that's the real revolution. So the next time someone tells you that without credentials, you are nothing, smile. They are still waiting for permission. You already started walking. Write this in the comments if you understand. I think without permission. That's not just a phrase. It's a declaration, a pact with your own mind. Because from this moment on, you no longer need validation to grow. You've remembered what the system wanted you to forget, that the power to learn has always been yours.